Today, we're diving into a really powerful set of tools. They're designed to do one thing, and one thing only: make invisible problems visible. We're going to uncover all those hidden inefficiencies that just drain resources, and we'll learn how to map them out. The goal? Clearing the path for some massive improvements in pretty much any process.
Just think about that for a second. What if the biggest drag on your team's productivity, the thing that's slowing everything down, isn't a person or a single mistake? What if it's more like a hidden sickness inside the system itself? A sickness that is just silently eating away at your time, your money, and your team's effort, and you don't even see it happening.
Well, the very first step in diagnosing this sickness is learning to see the difference between work that truly adds value for a customer and work that is, well, just waste. This is a core idea that was pioneered at Toyota, and it forces us to ask a really simple question for every single thing we do. Does this action make the final product or service more valuable to the person paying for it? If the answer is no, you might be looking at waste.
And look, this waste isn't just one single thing. It's more like a disease, and it has a very specific set of symptoms. And once you learn how to spot them, trust me, you start seeing them absolutely everywhere. Okay, so this slide breaks it all down for us. All work basically fits into one of these three buckets. Over on the left, you've got your value-adding activities. That's the good stuff, what the customer actually cares about and is happy to pay for. Then, way over on the right, you've got non-value-adding. That's pure waste, the stuff we want to just get rid of. But then there's this tricky category in the middle: necessary, but non-value-adding. Think about things like regulatory checks or unpacking parts. You have to do them right now, but they don't actually add value in the customer's eyes. These are the wastes we have to put up with today, but they should be our #1 target for some radical change tomorrow. So, how does this hidden sickness actually show up? Well, the Toyota production system identified 7 classic symptoms of inefficiency. You can think of this as the checklist a good process doctor uses to figure out what's wrong.
7. Yup, that's the magic number. And these aren't just some random problems, They are 7 universally recognized forms of waste that you can find in nearly every supply chain, every factory, every office. Learning to see them is the absolute first and most critical step toward finding a cure. And here they are. You've got overproduction. That's making more than you need sooner than you need it. Waiting. We've all been there. Unnecessary transport and motion. Inappropriate processing, which is kind of like using a sledgehammer to crack a nut. Piles and piles of unnecessary inventory just sitting around. And finally, the most obvious one of all, defects. Every single one of these is a clear symptom that something in the process is broken. But here's something you really need to get. Not all these symptoms are created equal. Overproduction is considered the most dangerous of them all. And why is that? Because making things before they're actually needed doesn't just create a bunch of inventory. It actively hides all the other problems in your system. It kills the smooth flow of work, it leads to defects that you might not find for weeks, and it just creates a ton of chaos downstream. Okay, so we know the symptoms, but how do we actually see them? A doctor doesn't just guess what's wrong. They use diagnostic tools. And that's exactly what we've got here. A whole toolkit designed to make all this invisible waste totally visible. And this slide, I think, just brilliantly shows the power of this approach. These mapping tools, they don't all come from one place. They're pulled from all over. From industrial engineering, from logistics, systems dynamics, operations management. It's a cross-functional diagnostic kit, which means we can get a complete picture of a process's health, not just some narrow view from one single specialty. So let's see how this actually builds into a real diagnosis. We're going to take a look at one of these tools in action. It's called demand amplification mapping, and you can think of it like an X-ray for your supply chain. All right, take a look at this. This chart shows what's actually happening at the checkout counter. Week in, week out, customers are buying this product at a pretty steady, predictable clip. It's all relatively calm. This is the reality of what the actual demand looks like. Now, contrast that with what's happening just one single step back in the supply chain. Look at the orders being placed on the supplier for that exact same product. It's total chaos. You see these wild swings from huge orders down to almost nothing. And this is all in reaction to that nice, stable customer demand we just saw. This whole phenomenon actually has a name. It's called the Forrester effect, or sometimes the bullwhip effect. What's happening is that each step in the supply chain is overreacting to tiny little signals, and they keep amplifying them up the chain until you get this massive, wasteful wave of volatility. Without a mapping tool like this, all that chaos would be completely invisible. just buried inside spreadsheets and purchasing orders. So, with a whole bunch of powerful diagnostic tools in the kit, how do you know which one to use? Which X-ray or MRI do you need for which symptom?
Well, you don't just guess.
The system actually gives you a guide. This matrix here shows you which tools are the most effective at diagnosing each of the 7 wastes. So let's say your biggest problem, your biggest symptom is waiting. You can see right here that the framework points you toward tools like process activity mapping and the supply chain response matrix, because they have a high correlation for uncovering that specific problem. It's a really systematic approach to diagnosis.
Now, this all sounds great in theory, right? But what does the cure actually look like in the real world? Let's take a quick look at a case study of an industrial distributor that put these exact tools into practice. So their prescription was a combination of 5 different mapping tools. They used all of them to get a complete, multifaceted diagnosis of their supply chain's health, looking at everything from lead times and quality issues, all the way to that demand amplification we just talked about. And the results of that diagnosis? It was just staggering. The company identified over 10 million pounds in potential savings every single year. That's the power of making the invisible visible. And like one of their executives said, it wasn't rocket science. It was just down-to-earth common sense that unlocked this massive potential. And that really brings us to the final question, doesn't it? Now that you have the diagnostic manual, you can become your own process doctor. You know the symptoms to look for, and you know the tools to use. So what hidden costly wastes are just waiting to be uncovered in your own value streams?